Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is a interview at Delmar Place residence, Delmar, New York. It is the 28th of February 2006, approximately 9:30 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
John E. Bailey,
Where and when were you born?
born in Albany, New York, on October 14th, 1924.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I had a high school diploma and a year of college at Siena College
Okay.
in Loudonville.
All right. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was sitting at the living room table at my home, Elm Street in Albany, doing my homework, as a matter of fact, I guess that's about the size of it as far as where I was and what I was doing.
How did you hear about Pearl Harbor?
Over radio.
Do you remember your reaction, how you felt?
Well, I was, I think, probably more confused than anything else in terms of what did it mean to me and to my family, etc. And it was, well, I guess confusing is the best word. So.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you decide to enlist?
Well, I enlisted in the Navy V-12 program, which was college-based, and I was at Siena College as a freshman at the time, and then went to active duty the following July 1st in 44. July 1st, 43.
Okay. Did you have anyone in the family that had been in the service? In the Navy? Or?
I had a twin brother, Bob, and we went together and went into the program together, and after we were in for maybe 6 months, we separated.
Okay. Where did you go for your training?
Went to Newport, Rhode Island.
Okay.
What kind of training did you have? Just
Basic boot camp, entrance level training, and that was the introduction to the Navy, so to speak.
did you go on to any advanced schooling or training with the Navy?
I went, well, originally, as I say, when I was in the V-12 program, I was in that for a little over a year, and while...
Oh, was that at Newport also?
No, I was at Holy Cross
Oh, okay.
at that time. My brother was too. We were both there. That was sort of in the days of the Sullivan brothers, the five brothers,
Yes.
and they looked at us as twins, and I don't know what they said, but I get the feeling that they may have leaned towards separating us. Excuse me. So he went on to the door of midshipman school, and at the last minute was not entered, and he went on to the boot camp Navy, and eventually to the Mid-Pacific Johnson Island, where he served as a weatherman. My training in the Navy was after boot camp. I was sent to Great Lakes Naval Station and entered the Great Lakes Hospital Corps School, where I was trained as a hospital corpsman in the Navy, of course. And subsequent to that, I went to Bethesda, Maryland, the National Naval Medical Center, and was enrolled in the Naval Medical School there, where I took various training courses and graduated from the School of Medical Technology there at Bethesda. And then the fun began. From there, after I served there a year, I was enlisted in the Fleet Marine Force, as we call the old FMF, to do duty with the Marine Corps, the 5th Service Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton. And subsequent to that training, I was sent to San Diego, where I was then shipped overseas to Guam. And at Guam, I was assigned to the 5th Marine Service Corps. And that essentially was, I was there for about 9 months, and what my duties there was, I was in charge of recording return of medical supplies from the 1st and 5th Marine Divisions in the Pacific.
Now, did you wear a Marine uniform?
Yes.
But you had the Navy stripes on.
Navy patch, yeah. Yeah, we had both the dress blues, and the I don't know what khaki colored regulation uniforms, and that was interesting because we were right out in the training fields where they were using live ammunition. Of course, we weren't involved with any military performance because corpsmen were restricted. They were not allowed to handle military guns or military equipment. I'm sure in the course of time there was some instances where a corpsman would pick up a rifle or what do you call it, because if he didn't, he was going to get killed. Mm-hmm. You know, but it was a rule that they were not to be involved in military personal action.
Now, was Guam secured when you were there?
Yes, and that was interesting from this standpoint. Landed over there after the war had ended in August of that year. And as far as the island being secured, it was essentially, although there were many instances of Japanese military who had hid when the Guam was secured. These people took to the jungles, and there were several instances while I was there of the Japanese soldiers either being shot or surrendered. And there was, I would guess, well over 200 that in the total number that were had stayed behind. And so it made life in the camp a little scary at times. I don't know if there were any American personnel killed or anything by the snipers, but there were instances of clashes, so to speak.
Did you ever see any of these Japanese soldiers?
I personally didn't, although they were near our base, the 5th Marine Service Depot. They were near us to the point where you could hear the gunshots in the distance, occasionally, only occasionally. And no, I really wasn't interested in seeing anything personally, certainly not at the end of a gun. But it was interesting, and I met some friends of mine from Albany. A fellow by the name of Ray Williams, and he was a high school classmate of mine at Cathedral. And then there was another gentleman, I can't remember his name now, but he was also from North Albany, and we in high school were in the South End at Cathedral, and this fellow was at Sacred Heart in North Albany, and we were quite strong rivalries. Of course, both the South Enders and the Sacred Heart North Enders were Irish, and that kind of led to the rivalry. So.
Now, what was life like on Guam? What was the climate like there?
Well, the climate was extremely warm, and probably at least half the year, monsoon rains, heavy rains, where it would rain for maybe 3 days and nights at a time. Heavy downpour. And we were in canvas tents, which didn't protect us all that much, but so you got used to wearing soggy boots and soggy shoes rather, and damp clothing, and never did quite get away from it. But the only real respite was the mess hall, and you were under cover there, of course, and for the most part we were able to get hot meals, and nothing extraordinary, but good.
How large was your medical unit?
This was not a medical unit per se. It was a unit of maybe 6 men, all involved in the collection and listing and preparing to return the medical goods to a base in the United States. And that we had a Lieutenant J.G. Who was the commander of the unit, and then we had a chief pharmacist mate who was the top enlisted, and then we had about 4 pharmacist mates who we had about 6 men in all in the group, and it was, as I said before, collection. You had to get this right, write it down, and put it over in that pile, or we'll get it ready for it.
So basically, at the end of the war, it was just cataloging and collecting and all the equipment.
We served the whole, both the 1st and the 6th Marine Divisions that were in the Pacific. One was in China. The 1st Marine Division was in China. and the sixth was in around Okinawa, in that area.
Do you have any remembrances that stand out more than others?
Well, there were several pleasant occasions and some kind of scary occasions. But I remember that when I was shipped out of San Diego to Pearl Harbor, and stationed on Pearl Harbor as a holding station, and they had a baseball league there, a former, as many as they could, major league ball players. And so I was the lieutenant in charge of that operation. Called me in one day. He said, "I understand you played quite a bit of baseball as a younger man." I said, "Yes, I did. I played in grade school, high school, college, semi-pro, and that all occurred in a period of 4 or 5 years." And he said, we're trying to get as many trained ball players as we can to form a league. So I wound up getting into being assigned to the league, and one of the men that I became close with was Dick Bartell, who had been the New York Giants shortstop and was an exceptionally good ball player, and he knew that I had played in the infield, in the short and third, and he said, "Why don't I take you under my wing?" He said, "I'll teach you a few of the things that I learned." I said, "Fine," you know. So we were there for about, that league ran about 3 months, and I, of course, after less than that, was shipped on to Guam. This was in Pearl Harbor, and it was interesting because many of these players were people that I had followed as a kid. And I mentioned Bartell because he was the one I was closest to. And needless to say, the ball players were fed better than it seems.
Now you mentioned here you played against the Yankee Clipper.
Joe DiMaggio. Only briefly in one game. And he shook hands with me, and I was quite thrilled over that. I was a St. Louis Cardinal fan, even as a 6-year-old. So I didn't meet any of my Cardinal friends or idols. I would like to have met the first baseman there. Can't think of his name now. Stan Musial.
Oh.
But he wasn't there until after I left. I found out later he came there. And so it was a good, sound, pleasant, if anything could be pleasant in wartime, period in my life.
Now you mentioned here that one of the things that left an impression, you said that booze was tough to control. What do you mean by that?
Booze, like in...
I guess so.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of tough to control, even though the Marine Corps, and I'm sure other groups in the Navy and so on, would have their officers' clubs, and then they'd have enlisted men clubs, and there would be almost invariably a sufficient supply of quote booze, primarily beer, and it flowed freely. it flowed freely, and some guys couldn't handle it, like the same as in civilian life, you know. And the Navy was, and I'm sure the Army the same way. They were very strict without being overly about the use or abuse of the alcohol. And for the most part, you didn't see any of the famous riots between the Navy and the Marines. They were bitter rivals, although as a Navy corpsman, I was often sought out by the Marine Corps Marines. And Doc, give me, you know, in class, I give you aspirin, you know. But they were always looking out for Doc, you know, and making sure he was okay and had good quarters. And in battle, of course, they were well protected by the Marines. So that was a novel, but very, very loyal and rewarding association.
Now, where were you when you heard about VJ Day?
I was on let's see. I was on Guam.
What was the reaction there?
Well, we didn't have all that many troops, of course, but it wasn't anything like, you always see the pictures of San Francisco, and in that group there's an awful lot of Navy personnel, but there was joy, and needless to say, there was a little extra in the rations.
Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was on the way to the west coast. I had been when I was in Bethesda at the Naval Medical Center when Roosevelt was brought in prior to his death, and they allowed us, the corpsmen and nursing personnel, to be by the front gate, and when he came in, he waved, hi, and that was quite a, you know, I mean, he was maybe the most famous man in the world, and right after that, I was shipped to the West Coast, and within a month of the time he entered Bethesda, he passed, and I was in Salt Lake City on the train going west, and that sort of was a real letdown. Of course, I was a strong Democrat, so I had been raised on President Roosevelt.
When were you discharged?
When was I discharged?
Yes, sir.
I was discharged in May of '45. Went from Guam to, had a tour of the South Pacific on the way back to the States, went down to Kwajalein, Eniwetok, and all those islands down toward Australia. And that was quite a trip. It was a weary trip, you know. And went back and, you know, and went to back to Pearl Harbor, and was there for maybe a week or so, and then was transferred to ships to take us to Norfolk down through the canal. And that was an experience that was, you know, quite different. It's something that we had never done before. and brought back a lot of our school days where you studied the canal, and it had the nickname the Big Ditch, and it was like a big ditch. It was just wide enough to accommodate some of the major naval vessels. And it was very serene there, and the big lake out in the middle of it, middle of the canal. And I don't recall the name of that, but that was quite different after being in the Pacific. Well, the passage through the canal took us over a week because we had to wait at the Pacific end for ships coming through from the Atlantic side and so on. So it was about a week of waiting and so on. But it was again a novel experience. And once we got to the Atlantic, we went up the east coast to Norfolk Naval Base, and we were discharged from the ships to shore, and then we got on trains and went up to Lido Beach, which was a discharge center, and discharged there on May 29th, and came home to Albany, and just in time for Memorial Day the next day, and I got quite a kick out of marching in the Memorial Day parade. Of course, there were huge numbers in the Albany area. So that was pretty much the extent of the homecoming, except my parents greeted me when I got off the train in Albany, and that was a happy reunion. My brother had gotten home a week or so earlier, and so it was a novel experience being in the service with a twin brother, because some of the bases where we were together, hey Bailey, and they're two-handed, Papa. So I would say I had a normal but exciting and safe and healthy and enjoyable career in the Navy, and prayed to God every night, of course, to keep us all safe, and maybe strengthen my religion, my own personal religion, because of the uncertainty of everything.
Did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
Yeah. Oh yes. When I got out, as I say, in 45, returned to Siena College, where I had a year before going into this service, and re-entered Siena on the GI Bill, and that was significant in terms of I had done 3 full years before graduation, and then subsequent to graduation, I went to Siena, entered Siena graduate school, and for 2 years, nights, and that was continuing with the GI Bill. So probably I don't know how many thousands, but significant amount of money. And I was very glad to have it. And needless to say, my father was glad to have both his sons on the GI Bill. My brother, when he finished Siena after 3 years, then went up to RPI and enrolled in the architect's course up there and continuing with the GI Bill. And he did very well. He graduated with honors and went on to work with the telephone company and had an excellent career with them. And so the GI Bill did us a lot of good, enabled us to continue our education without worrying about money.
Did you ever use the 5220 club?
Yes. You're asking all the right. Used at the first, well, they say got out in, was discharged in May of 45. And from May, yeah, from June 1st until September 1st, we'll say, it was 5220?
5220 club.
Yeah, took good care of that.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
So I know of the Fort Orange Post, the American Legion, Fort Orange Post number 30. And as a matter of fact, I still have a card there, 50, over 50 years, 52 I guess. And that had a lot of good times there. Of course, that was always the place to go on Friday night. And beer was plenty and cheap and such a whatever. And they had, a lot of comradeship there. And I met fellows that I had served with in the service. And so I say that my father put my brother and I in the veterans.
Veterans of Foreign Wars.
No, what's the regular American Legion?
American Legion.
Had put us in the American Legion right after we went into the service.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 42 to this is what 06.
06.
So that's I remember for 64 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time.
Yes.
A long time. But, I've seen a lot of changes there.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a great place for us as veterans to hang out on the weekends. And when I was there, I started a basketball team. My brother and I both had athletic scholarships to Siena, primarily for basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we joined the American Legion after coming home, I was there for a while, and one of the top legionnaires there said, "Bailey, come over here." And I said, "Yes." He said, "I understand you're quite a good basketball player." Well, I said, "I played a little. Why don't you get a team up here? Get a team for us." So we got a team, and we went under the Fort Orange Post of American Legion. and went around all the different places in the area, Capital District. And one I remember very strongly was down at the Cook-Sacking Institute for, well, it was the next step beyond reform school. And we played down there, and I remember one of our boys had got into a mix-up. They were a tough group, as you might expect, off New York City, and they razzed us something awful. And we were beating them, and one of our guys had his shoulder dislocated. And when he hit the deck, the roar came up from the residence. Kick him! Kick him! And one of the chief guard takers, quieted him down. But we wound up had to take him to the hospital in Catskill, and his shoulder was set, and then he was discharged, and we brought him back home. But that was a novel experience. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was. You talk about having to be tough. You had to be tough, and so.
How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
Well, I think it focused on the medical aspect, because when I returned to Siena, I majored in biology, pre-med, and it wasn't for the combination of the GI Bill and the athletic scholarship, I was able to get all my pre-med training. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get into medical school, as many others couldn't. And we had 33 graduates of Siena at that time in 48. Biology majors, and 2 of them got into medical school, and the rest of us just couldn't. There was no room. There was no room, and it wasn't that we weren't qualified enough. Most of us went on to get a master's degree, and which indicates some advanced ability, academically speaking. And subsequent to graduation, I went to school nights at Siena for 2 years to get a master's degree in biology. And then subsequent to that, I went to work in the drug field, pharmaceutical field, and had about 14 years of very successful employment. At a number of instances where I was cited for outstanding sales, etc. And it was a very good learning experience on how to deal with medical personnel, doctors, pharmacists, and so on and so forth, and also to deal with other pharmaceutical personnel that you're associated with. And so that stood me in good stead when I joined in New York State service in 1966. Went to work in the health department, and my background, my training gave me a good start, grade-wise. And I stayed in the health department for 28 years. And I did very well financially. I was assigned to head up a program for the United States government for the training, for the identification, training, assistance of veterans with health career training and experience. Set them up to get them into either a health institution for additional training, like X-ray technologists and medical techs and licensed practical nurses and stuff like that. And then once they completed that training, we assisted them in placing them in employment situations. So it was an exciting and sometimes frustrating period, but I was quite pleased because at the end I was voted by Washington. The people in Washington designated me as the #1 program director in the United States. So I didn't get any more money, but it was an honor. It was an honor, and I was singled out by them. And so I had significant experience in the health field, and finally I was going to say discharged, not discharged, but
Retired.
retired. Same difference. And retired from the health department after 28 years. And I was home for retirement for a period of about 6 months, and I said, I got to do something. Of course, I had a family in the meantime. And so I think I was, I don't think how old I was. Oh, I think I was 72. And I went back into the employment scene. Went to work for J.C. Penney, Dick's Sporting Goods, various couple of years each one, so on and so forth, and Sears. And most of the time they'd only take you out for maybe a year, trying to get more people in. So then when I finally went to work for Boscov's department stores in Colony Center, and went there and did very well. Of course, we got minimum wage, which was something, you know, because I still had my Social Security and retirement pension from the state health department. So worked for them for 6 years. And the last 3, I had some difficulties health-wise, not life and death threatening, but enough to make it, to calm down. The doctor said, take it easy. So I had some cardiac distress. And after out in the hospital for, maybe, I guess 10 days, 10 days. And I went back to Boscov's and stayed off for the summer, and then went back to them in August. And I said I'd like to come back to work. And the woman who was in charge of personnel said, well, we'd love to have you, but get a statement from your doctor. So my doctor, who was still my current doctor, Dr. Strizich, excellent man, said, what do you want to work for? You don't need the money, do you? And I said, no, I don't, and I didn't. I had sufficient, really sufficient funds. But I said I want to be with people, because that was my whole life, was with people, either playing ball or academically or medically, or it was always with people. And I thrived on it, and that was my existence. So I stayed for 3 more years, and for a total of 6 with Boscov's, and then of course I said, medically I've got to leave. And of course they were very nice about the whole thing. They gave me as much as they could in the way of retirement funds, in addition to my others. So I did very well with Boscov's. So 1 year, counting my New York State pension, my Social Security, and my Boscov's income, and that's when I was working 40 hours a week. That year, I was quite proud of the fact that I grossed $62,000.
Wow.
That was, people have made more than that, I'm sure.
Yes.
But that was significant. And I said, well, it served me well. So, and I wound up, well, the 6 years that I was working with Boscov, I made some advancements. I lived over in Beltone Living Center for seniors, and lived there 6 years, and I enjoyed myself, got to know a lot of people, etc. But then I had some more medical problems, and said didn't want me fixing my own meals, etc. And so on. So that's when my son and daughter looked up this place and said, that'd be a great place for you, Dad. And I agree with him. I've been here 3 months now to the day, and it's been wonderful. I was having a weight problem before, and I put on 16 pounds. And I comes from eating 3 times a day, regularly, and good food, and etc. So that's where we are today. And I love it here, and I'm so glad that there is such a good place as this. I'm able to thrive on it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Well, my pleasure.